All right, Steeler fans, it is Monday. It's time for another Monday morning conversation. And I have had quite the array of people on this segment throughout the years. And sometimes they're reporters that are there watching the Steelers. And sometimes I get to bring on fans, people that have found our content in some way, shape, or form. And sometimes those fans also have a background in sometimes it's music, sometimes it's podcasting. In this case, it is podcasting and interviewing. Rob Sprance. Rob, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you. I'm excited. As I told you before, been listening to you guys for years now, so it's kind of cool to be behind the curtain, so to speak.
Yeah, it used to be. Yeah. Now, let's ask that question. How did you find us at one point? Because I always am curious how some people stumble upon our work or some people were told about it from someone else. How did you find, but at the time, Behind the Steel Curtain, which is now Steel Curtain Network?
Yeah, so it's funny because people ask me a lot, because of my podcast. So what podcast do you listen to? But it's pretty much all Steelers, and it's a pretty boring answer, when I say that, because that's all I'm listening to, including the live radio and all that stuff. So
Yeah.
I think I started just searching for everything available Steelers and added them and checked out each and every one, and about 10 got removed immediately. But you guys went into the heavy rotation pretty quickly, and I was even very happy to see in the last year or so you were challenged on your sources, and then you guys came out on top, proving that your source was correct. So, that was even though we don't talk much. Believe me, it was a nice win for you guys. I was very proud of
Yeah,
you
I
guys.
appreciate that. You got to take your victory laps every now and then. And if someone called me out on Twitter, like, well, maybe if you stop patting your back every 5 seconds, like, okay, I get it. Maybe one lap around the track's enough. Maybe you don't need to do two,
Yeah.
three, or four. I get
But
it. I
it's
get it. But
fun to pat
it
yourself on the
is.
back. It's the point.
I mean, in today's day and age with the Steelers and with the reporting and with all the stuff, I mean, sourced information is so vague that
Oh God.
some people are like deciphering fact from fiction is it can be difficult. And then you talk about the aggregators who are just taking everything and running with it.
Right,
It can
writing
be
an
tough.
article based on a source that said something to someone else that no one knows. Yeah, and it's crazy because there are a few, and I'm not going to mention the blogs because I don't even want to give them eyes, but
Yeah,
we all know who those clickbait accounts are,
for sure.
to the point where like there's somewhere I just call out every post, and one of the guys actually wrote me and sent me a DM. He's like, come on, man, you know how it is in podcasting. You have to get, or sites, you have to get attention no matter how. I was like, take a look at the 300 shows I did. Tell me if you see one ad, one clickbait, one
Yeah.
misleading thing. So I just like to troll that one person quite a bit every time they post something, because it's always nonsense. It's always nonsense.
Exactly. But you're a diehard fan, obviously, if you consume that much content. I do have to ask you, as a fan, how did your fandom start? Did you grow up in a Steelers household? Did you find them on your own? Tell me that story.
No, so I'm a New Yorker. So my family are all Jets fans, and it doesn't
Oh,
help that the Steelers always lose to the Jets for some reason. I actually went out. I for the first time I got to see a game at Acrisure 2 years ago. I actually went to Kenny's first snap,
okay.
which at the time I thought might have been a historical moment, but in retrospect, I guess not. But I got to go on the field. Like I set up for the game day tour and everything.
Cool.
So we went out on the field, and I brought a little Ziploc bag, and when nobody was looking, I ripped a bunch of grass up off the thing. I rubbed my terrible towel on the 10-yard line, all of that kind of stuff. So when I was a kid, I'm dating myself, of course, but it was towards the tail end of the 70s run when they were just winning constantly. And, everybody's like, well, you're a fair weather fan. Okay. First of all, I didn't know the 80s was coming. That's one. But secondly, and more importantly, is there was no Sunday ticket. There was no cable. It was whomever was on locally at any given time. And the Steelers were a big brand. So they were on television a lot. So it's really either it was Jets, Giants, or sometimes Steelers, or sometimes Cowboys. So I had a brief flirtation with the Vikings for like a year when I was like 7, because I liked the purple. But then once I started watching the games, I became a Steeler fan. And then I suffered through the 80s and 90s for a while until I
Yeah.
started winning again.
I say this all the time because everyone says, "Oh, you're a front runner or you're a fair weather fan." But in terms of your genesis of your fandom, like when did it start? It all starts with people that became those. Hey, this team's really good. I'm going to start following them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Show me people that were Steeler fans before the 70s, and they're a rare bunch because they sucked. They were awful.
Mhm.
And then the 70s come, and Chuck Noll comes in and all of a sudden revitalizes the entire organization, and they start getting these amazing
Yeah.
drafts, and they win 4 Super Bowls in 6 years. It's an easy team to root for. And so then they have kids, and then they start following the team, and then it becomes almost genetic. So interesting story. The Jets. Hey, you'll have a chance of redemption this year. I will talk
Yeah,
about
I
that.
do, although I don't expect it. And again, that's the game that I went to. Of
Yeah,
course, they
there's a
play the
chance.
Jets. And the reason why, like, I didn't want to pick them seeing the Jets because I can watch that locally, number one. Number two, I've seen them play the Jets here in New York and the Giants whenever they come here.
Right.
But I was like, you know what? Let me pick a game that's not in the coldest of times, the first couple of months.
Yep.
And it just so happened that the Jets, I think, was sandwiched between the home opener and a Tom Brady game, I think, in the Buccaneers.
Yeah.
So the tickets were like $1,000 a ticket. Then the Jets game went down to like 400, and then the Tom Brady went up to 1,000. So I was like, I guess the Jets it is. So
Yeah.
I guess
Hey.
we're going for the Jets.
Money talks. So I want to talk about this team in particular, this 2024 team, and really about the Steelers organization. And you do host your own podcast, the whole podcast, and you've interviewed Steelers. We're going to talk about that in a little bit.
Mhm.
I want to talk about how the Steelers handle rookies, because really, when you think about it, let's just talk the Mike Tomlin era. And that's a long era already,
Mhm.
but let's just keep it locally and let's keep it more in terms of the most recent years. The Steelers don't like to thrust their rookies into the lineup before they have to. And you mentioned Kenny Pickett's first game. I'll go on record as saying I don't think the Steelers wanted to play him in that week 4 game at
Mhm.
halftime. They felt that they had to, and that's a really bad situation to be in, especially when you're talking about the quarterback position. But I feel like in some cases, and maybe we are talking about this in 2024, they're becoming a little over reliant on rookies to have to step up and perform at a high level early on. But I want to go back to just an organizational viewpoint. What's your take on how the Steelers handle rookies? Are you
Mhm.
in favor of it? Do you think that they need to get with the time, so to speak? And I use air quotes for those that were listening in audio. Or do you think that what they do is prudent?
Well, yeah, it's a great question because let's take the Kenny situation aside because I
Yeah.
think that did come from, there were rumors stemming that, Trubisky got into a fight, and had halftime. And, you know, I was in that building and it was very uncomfortable. The boos and everything, the "We want Kenny" chants were really, really loud. And I don't
Yeah.
think Mike Tomlin would ever respond to those kind of things. But one of the arguments I do hear a lot is like Mike Tomlin doesn't trust rookies. He brings them in too slow. It takes too long. But you've got examples of why that kind of worked because Broderick Jones, when he finally did get in the lineup, was looking really good. Joey Porter Jr. was looking really good. Unless you see a full sample of what would have happened one way or the other, you never really get to see that. But there's one argument I don't hear people make enough, and that is when rookies come from college to pro, they play a lot more games than they would
Right.
if they just, it's not by the time the college season is over is when the NFL starts to get to be its hardest, most war of attrition type of time. So I think there's also an outlook in that, like, hey, these guys are going to be worn out if we throw them all in. Now we have a couple this year that, let's face it, there's not going to be a choice. Zach Frazier comes to mind immediately. You've got nothing else. So, I think this was one of the first drafts that we've gone into in a long time where we actually had needs at position or just not have anything. Like I've never seen us go into a draft and not have at least one center. And people were talking about Herbig, and that was never going to happen.
Right.
So I think we're going to get to see what happens when they throw them in right from the beginning. But I do think that plays a part in Tomlin's mindset. I can't speak for the man. He knows way more about football than I'll ever know. But at the same time, I do think that plays a part, that he doesn't want them burnt out for the most important part of the season. And as we saw last year, those last stretch with Mason, that wasn't the only thing that made the team better. Mason looked very good, yes, but Kenny looked very good in that first post-Canada game too.
Yeah.
But what also happened is we started running the ball a lot more because we put Broderick Jones in full time. Chooks did something stupid on the sidelines and spoke out, and then they threw him out. Tomlin kicked him out. I don't know why I keep turning blue here on the camera, but that's a conversation. But yeah, like those things do really play a part in it as well.
I always say, everyone loves to criticize Mike Tomlin and for what he says, like the Tomlinisms. And I get it. It can be repetitive. It can be almost nauseating at times. I'll be honest here. But
Mhm.
I think too, I want to listen to what the players say. I want to hear what the players have to say. They're the
Mhm.
ones that were handled a certain way. So what you mentioned, Broderick Jones and Joey Porter Jr. picks 1 and 2 last year. And even Keanu Benton, the other second round pick, I call him the forgotten second round pick. Everyone thinks he's a third round pick.
Right. Yeah.
But really, they all to a T said, in hindsight, I'm really happy with what the Steelers did and how they handled the situation. And a lot of fans are like, what are you talking about? Okay, so when we're criticizing this organization for not playing a Broderick Jones until week 4, when he spot started at left tackle for Dan Moore against Baltimore and
Mhm.
then shifted over to right tackle, okay, you can be critical, but listen to what they're saying. Joey Porter Jr. echoed the same sentiment. And so I try to lean on what the players think, because let's look at Roman Wilson, who's a third round draft pick. And not even talking about him this year. Let's talk about last year.
Yeah.
He plays for Michigan. Okay. The Michigan's regular season's done at the end of November.
Mhm.
And so they have all of December basically off. Like just to rest, relax, recover. I remember Tim Tebow had surgery on his thumb and he took the Heisman and the cast on and still played in the national championship game. And then they were out there playing in the playoffs and they're fine. So people say, well, they played all the way until January. Yeah, with a month off in between. So this brings up my next question, but you kind of alluded to this a little bit already. This year, 2024, this draft class, when you think about Troy Fautanu, you talked about Zach Frazier, you talk about Roman Wilson, Peyton Wilson, just those first 4 selections. Do you think that the Steelers might have no other option but to be overly reliant on some of those players?
Yeah, I think they do. Although, again, this is, we're middle of May, so what
Yeah.
the team's going to look like is going to change. I do really think that they're going to look for another wide receiver, maybe to take a little of the stress off of Wilson. But
Yeah.
I also think, one, George Pickens comes down the wrong way once and you are pretty screwed. So,
Yep.
there's a little more to it than just that. But just one other quick thing before we transition to what you said that I also thought of is another thing that happens with these rookies is they train, their season ends, and then they go into this weird combine training, which has nothing to do
Exactly.
with training for a season. So
Right.
these guys have spent months and months training for that, as you call it, the underwear Olympics, to,
Yep.
to do jumps and to do things that they normally, Zach Frazier's not going to do sprints, all the time. It's not
Right.
really what he's going to do. So the training that they do for the combine versus the training they do for a season is totally different too. So I wonder if that plays a part. Now, all of that said, yes, I do think we're not going to have a choice at center, without a doubt. I do think he'll spend a little time with Fautano and see what they've got. I know there's that left tackle, right tackle debate. I think whoever pass protects better is going to wind up on the left. I think that makes the most sense. It's the blind side, and Russ is kind of known to buy time, and so is Justin, and that could be deadly in the beginning. But I think we're not going to have a choice. I think the way that Roman Wilson might be a little easier because we do have Fryermuth, we do have Pickens, and they did sign, like, they're not fantastic receivers or game changers, but we signed some good receivers at least to have some depth there. So I'm really curious to see what he does. I know at center he's not going to have a choice, but with the other positions, I'm sure he's going to bring him in a little slowly.
Yeah, it was interesting you bring up the combine training, and that's a real thing, and you listen to this draft class. So if you listen to Troy Fautanu, you listen to Zach Frazier, when they're at rookie minicamp, they were asked by the media, like, "Are you just happy to be here?" "I'm just so happy to play football again."
Hmm.
And like, "Well, what do you mean?" They said, "All I've done the last 6 months is, like you said, working on my 40-yard dash time, working on my vertical leap, working on my broad jump, working on my 3-cone drill, working on my bench press." That's all they're doing. And like you said, that's not conditioning and training for football. So now they get to put that aside and they get to focus, but that's also zero downtime. So Frazier's going to be tested. I agree with you 100%. But as for
Hmm.
the others, I think Roman Wilson, Peyton Wilson, the 2 Wilsons in the 3rd round, they absolutely have some leeway where they can be ushered in slowly. Fautanu is the wild card here for me. I don't
He is.
think, if I were a betting man, and I'll ask you what you think, I don't think he starts week 1. Do you?
Well, so I think, believe it or not, everyone's talking about the brutal schedule, and I'm sure we're going to get into that,
Yes, sir.
and the brutal end stretch. If you look at it, though, let's take out that brutal end stretch, and it's hard to do that right now and think that we're not going to be miserable week after week. But if you look at that first gauntlet of games, it is the easier slate.
Yeah.
So maybe this is a benefit for us. Maybe that is a good time to play. I'm not. Do I want Frazier in there against, the Ravens week 1, against the Browns coming at you week 1? Or do I want, the Falcons and the Broncos and teams that, look, all teams are hard. And as we all know as Steelers fans, the ones you think are going to be wins or losses and vice versa. But
Right.
we do have a nice, easy stretch in the beginning. So if I was a betting man, I think he's gonna play them a lot more than he normally
All right.
would, based on the schedule and the way it laid out.
Yeah, and what's different compared to previous years is that they don't have that early bye week. So when you had that early, like week 5, week 6 bye week, you could easily say, we're going to see if we can get these guys to post bye, and then we'll talk about inserting them in the lineup. That's a week 9 bye. You're not going to wait that long. And so there's
Mhm.
going to have to be a decision made. We'll see how that goes. You brought up
Yeah.
the schedule. I wanted to get your take on it. You mentioned the gauntlet that is post bye
Yep.
after the Commanders game in week 10. It does get really difficult.
Mhm.
What's your take on the schedule? Are you of the ilk that say the NFL's out to screw the Steelers with the 6 out of 8
Yeah.
division games post bye? Or are you more of we knew this is kind of my take. We knew these opponents since the end of last season, and
Mhm.
it's the Chiefs at home is going to be tough no matter it's on Christmas Day on a Wednesday or
Right.
if it's week 2. So what's your take on the schedule?
Yeah, so and that Chiefs game, I think, to us is a benefit because it's a short week, and we all know that on a short week anything can happen, which is also why I hate that we have to go to Cleveland,
Yeah.
on a short week after playing
After
the
a road game.
Ravens. It's weird. If we only won 2 games every year, I want it to be the Browns games, but so when I saw that, I was a little disappointed at that part. But this team has had a way in the past, and every roster is different, so you can't go by past precedent. But this team has notoriously done really well in the later winter months. I think we're built for that. But most of the time, that's not just all AFC North opponents who are
Right.
also good for that. And we've dominated the North, last year, and we've had an upper hand on the Ravens for a long time. That's not gonna last forever. I always look at those games and just automatically, everybody does their wins and losses when they go down it. I automatically split the North teams because I think that's usually how it pans out. I was shocked how it panned out last year. I don't expect us going 5-1 in the division again, but you never know. I don't think the NFL's out to screw anybody. I think the NFL's out to get the most marquee matchups as they can as it gets closer and closer to the playoffs, because they're more about money than spiting a team. It just feels that way because we saw this list of teams before the schedule came
Yeah.
out. You arrange them any way you want and tell me if it's still not a brutal schedule. It just is. The
Yeah.
opponents are what makes it hard. And the fact that we're in the best division in football, not even close, automatically gives us, 6 difficult games to start with. So we're always going to have a tougher strength of schedule.
Yeah. When it comes to sports, and I've said this on other podcasts, especially with my NFL Whip Around podcast with Coach KT Smith on our FFSN NFL feed. I love a good sports conspiracy theory. Like, I
Mhm.
really do. Like, I
Yeah.
put my tinfoil hat on and let's have some fun. Like, that's the way I view these things. When I heard, like, oh, they looked at Taylor Swift's Eras Tour schedule when they
I
were
could.
making the Chiefs schedule,
Mhm.
I'm like,
It's
people
possible.
laugh at that. People laugh at that. I could see it. The NFL brought in how many new fans last year with Taylor Swift going to Chiefs games? Don't tell me that doesn't play a role. Now, is that like a huge impact of like, when did they play the Chiefs at home in terms of Pittsburgh? It's Wednesday on Christmas Day. I don't know. Are you like me with sports conspiracy
Yeah,
theorists? You
look,
love to kind of go down that rabbit hole?
if I'm the schedule makers, yeah, there's certain things I want to see. I want to see, I want the Russell Wilson revenge game at a certain time.
Yep.
I want Justin Fields if he was playing. I don't think they play the Bears this year, but
They don't.
you want too bad. But all of those things, of course, those things come into play. But again, the Christmas Day game is a marquee game. So yeah, they're going to pick the best team in the league and maybe the team that has the most following, the biggest following, and play them on prime time. Like I pay $400 something for the Sunday ticket package because I live in New York, and I think only 6 or 5 games we're not on locally here in New York. So the Steelers are on television a lot.
Yeah.
I do think there's a little of that for sure. I don't think it's I don't think Taylor Swift is the reason why we have 8 hard games at the end of the year, though. So who knows? Who knows?
Yeah.
But if I'm the league, of course, I try to maximize any, especially this league where they had like 500,000 people at a draft, which is shocking to me. You watch the people on the second level all the way back. Like, what are they doing besides being drunk? Like, they're just staring at the stage, watching people come out.
Fun, man. They're just having fun.
Yeah. So,
living the dream.
So whatever they're doing, it's working for the league. It's just unfortunately didn't pan out well for us this year.
It's all about viewership, which equates to revenue, and that's what it's all about. So if they bring in, let's say they brought in 500,000 new football fans last year because of Taylor Swift, they're going to look at Taylor Swift's schedule. Like, that's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to ask you, well, before we leave the schedule and start talking about the Steelers in 2024 more from an organic perspective, I want to ask you, what's your take on the NFL starting to go into the streaming services for specific games? Like that Christmas Day game, you don't have Netflix, you better either be ponying up the $6.99 for a month and then canceling it unless you live locally, or you're not going to watch it. They've done this with Prime on Thursday Night Football for I think the last 2 or 3 years. What's your take on this avenue that they're going down?
Yeah, so if I don't mind it mainly because one, I have the streaming services already, so it's a selfish take. But it also is, keep in mind they're all on locally though. So in Pittsburgh, fans can still watch that game on television. So it's not like it's not going to be broadcast locally. I do, however, notice a couple of things though, is that these streaming services are taking a more forward look at how they're doing things. Like Prime gives you a second feed, and whether you like it or not, I thought the quality was very good, in my opinion. No people complained about it. Maybe their internet wasn't as good or everything, but I have good internet here because of the podcast. And I think the quality looks way better. I don't mind it as much because I do think in about 5 to 10 years, it's all we're going to have anyway. I do wish that Apple won the Sunday ticket over Google, because Apple wanted to include it for free for every subscriber, and that was one of the biggest sticking points that the NFL refused to do.
Really?
Like, Apple was willing to pay what the lost revenue was going to be so that they could just get their subscribers to watch Sunday ticket, and that's all they wanted. But the NFL didn't want to, quote unquote, devalue the $450 Sunday ticket, because once that happens, it can never go somewhere else. So it was disappointing. I really wanted Apple to get it. I also think that their infrastructure for a good quality stream is better, but I don't mind it. I think it's all going that way anyway, and as long as I can watch it, I really don't care about everybody else.
So, I will say this. So last year, I got YouTube TV, and because of the Sunday ticket, because obviously living in Maryland, I'm not in the local viewing area. When there were games that were on Amazon, like a Thursday night game, I had a lot of fans saying, "Oh my gosh, Jeff, you're like 6 plays ahead of me. What is going on?" The key that we figured out is if you have a built-in app on your remote, do not use that app. Get if you have a Roku stick or a Roku or a Fire Stick, get the app there, and that'll be up to speed. So that's what we figured out. So just a little tip for anyone out there that's streaming the games and they're wondering, I'm looking on Twitter, how is Jeff almost like 3 or 4 plays ahead of me? Try that trick before you go and call your internet provider and say, why am I behind everyone? So,
yeah, right. And, the other unfortunate thing is, because almost none of my friends are Steeler fans, I just have 1 or 2. So most of the time, if I'm getting text about a Steeler game, it's something negative. So I don't look at my phone during it, because it's just going to get aggravated, I was like, you know what? I don't want to. One, I don't want the game blown for me if I'm behind it. I don't know. But more importantly, is usually just negative stuff that I don't want to hear. So
absolutely. All right. So let's talk about your hopes, or whatever. How do you view 2024? Because you look at the schedule, it's bad, it's daunting. We know that. You look at the roster, there's still some holes. You mentioned earlier in the show that you think that they're still going to make some moves, and I would tend to agree with you. But as we sit here right here in the middle of May, what's your take on 2024, the Steelers? What do you think?
Unfortunately, it's just like every other season. It's really going to come down to the quarterbacks more than anything. I do have confidence that we'll at least get good enough play out of Russ to equal what we had last year, which is, a low bar to say the
Yeah.
least. But that being said, it's weird to me that both of them are on 1-year deals. And I can't help but, especially for someone like Omar Khan, who is very, very methodical in everything that he does, I wonder what that 2025 plan is and how much that plays a part in 2024. I Part of me doesn't even think that they see Justin Fields as a future quarterback. Part of me just wonders if they want to just see what sticks and maybe make a run at Lawrence, or maybe, I don't know. So it's weird. It's a weird lame duck scenario to
Yeah.
have both, but the benefit of that is both quarterbacks have something to prove and they have something to play for. So I think this is part of the rebuild we've been talking about. I think we're maybe another draft away from having a really, really solid group. Um, a lot of people are on their last years. Cam is trying to get an extension as well, and a lot of these other players. So this is the first time going in that I really have no idea what to expect. Like my friends at work, they're always like, when they're betting every week, they're like, "What do you think of the Steelers?" "Oh, Mike Tomlin, this Monday night games." I throw a couple stats, and then they bet the Steelers, and and I sound like I know what I'm talking about. But this time around, like, there are so many variables. I do not know what to expect, and that makes me very excited for the season. When I went through the wins and loss thing, I came up with either 10-7, 11-6, and of course I'm going to be wrong on some of the wins and wrong on some of the losses, as I always am. And we also don't know what these teams are going to look like towards the end of the year. Joe Burrow
Yeah.
gets hurt again, Lamar gets hurt again. You never know. But I think it's a transitional year, the second of its kind. I think what they are kind of doing with the last Colbert draft is kind of like a purge. Like, Leal's not getting much time. I think Austin's in a bit of trouble because they picked up a couple of speedy Austin-like players, and if
Mhm.
it's just to push him, so be it. Look what they didn't pick up Najee's year. His extension. They traded Kenny away, although Kenny sabotaged himself in that one. I'm
Yeah.
sure he's looking back. I can't see him not looking back and be like, I think I made a mistake. Like, because he didn't want to be a backup and compete, but now he's in a place where he's going to be a backup whether he likes it or not. It was weird. It was kind of like Deontay's like, "Hey, I don't want to be here anymore." Okay, fine, go to Carolina. Good luck catching passes from Bryce Young.
Yeah.
Like, you don't want to be here, Kenny? Okay, you'll be a backup in Philly for good. I don't think it's a spite move, but we got Peyton Wilson out of it, so we'll
It's
see.
interesting. It is interesting. It's going to be a really interesting year, and I too see the quarterback situation and wonder what's going to happen. I've also resigned myself to saying, let's just see what 2024 brings, and let's deal with
Mhm.
2025 when it gets here. I would not be shocked, though. I would not be shocked if the Steelers don't play their hand in a way that fans don't really understand right now. And what I mean by that is, I wouldn't be shocked if they sign Justin Fields. I missed Justin Wilson. Justin Fields to a modest 2-year extension before the start of the season, but after training camp and after some preseason games so they've seen what he can do. And then he doesn't play that much this year unless
Right.
there's an injury.
Mhm.
And so Russell Wilson, regardless of how he plays, if he plays great, he's probably going to ask for too much money. And if he doesn't play or he gets hurt, then the Justin Fields is going to be in there. I think they want to keep that a 6th-round draft pick next year to Chicago. And then if
Yeah.
they think that what they have is a guy that could actually be a high upside quarterback, they've already locked him up for another 2 years. So we'll see how they play their cards. When it gets real dicey is if the season starts and both of those guys are truly in lame duck seasons. That would be
Mhm.
really, really intriguing.
Yeah.
But
I
I want to bring up your podcast, the whole podcast. Tell me a little bit about where this started. What was the genesis for this? And I do want to talk about your interviews. You interviewed Cam Hayward last year, and also
Yeah.
you've interviewed Ryan Clark.
Mhm.
Great interviews. I actually got to
Thank
ask
you.
Ryan Clark a question
That's
via
right.
you on
Mhm.
Twitter. So tell me where
Yeah,
the
yeah.
whole podcast started, and then we'll go into those interviews.
Yes, I've been doing it for 14 years now.
Wow.
But when it started, it was not an interview show. It was the, quintessential 5 guys around a table acting like fools, like every podcast that there is this day. But it was also considered a joke back then, like your ham radio in your basement instead of a Mac in your basement, which is
Yeah.
technically what this is. Um, but over time, years and years of doing it. We built up a really good following, but it was getting to be a lot to go into the city. We had a studio in Manhattan, and then COVID hit, and we couldn't do it even if we wanted to. So myself and Lori, my co-host, were from the other show. And Franco and the other guys just weren't available to do it as much. It wasn't as easy for them to do it that way, or nor, after I get it, after years and years, not everybody wants to do it every single year. I'm sure you have that with your crew. Sometimes people are
Yeah,
over it, or I'm
absolutely.
over it sometimes and then come back. I'm sure you're not always excited to do the show.
Yeah.
Um, so we kind of transitioned, and I used all the contacts that I built up over the first 10 years and started going after, celebrity guests to interview. And Tom Arnold was very helpful to us. That really helped. Noel Castler was a guest of ours that connected us with Tom. And it's weird. This kind of snowball starts. You get one person, then another person will agree to do it because that person did it. And then the next thing you're looking at the list, and I sometimes can't believe it myself when I go through the list of names of who we were able to have on. But most people are really, really cool about it.
Yeah. And you interviewed one of my favorite actors of all time, Matthew McConaughey. My
Yeah.
Dazed and Confused is probably a top 10 movie for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a great interview. But what was it like interviewing as a Steeler fan, Cam Hayward and Ryan Clark? And what was that like? Because I've obviously I do interviews every single week. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you get excited because you're
Yeah.
interviewing someone that you're really excited to talk to.
Oh, it was great. It was great because I got a Super Bowl winning legend, and I got a current legend, which was great for me on both. And both of them was so nice. It's a weird thing because I get nervous, and I get not nervous. I get very anxious before it starts, and I do I over prep, like to a ridiculous degree. So I can have a conversation and never look at a piece of paper or anything like that. So it was very easy to interview two Steelers because, but at the same time, I know if you ask them questions, Ryan was different because he's already retired. But in Cam's case, there's not much he's not going to talk about changes in the playbook and say no
Right.
one ever does. So why not focus on what it was like to go from the draft to start playing and the things that you and I will never experience. And that's the angle I take for every interview I do. I'm never going to know what it's like to be McConaughey, right? So my question is going to be for everyone else that's listening who is never going to experience that. What does it feel like to be that? What is it?
Yeah.
How did those things come up? And with the two Steelers, it was very, very easy to do. Other than prepping for what they were promoting at the moment, everything else was just a wing of conversation. And both of them could not have been nicer. Cam was the coolest dude, for the whole interview, and they all were. Even McConaughey, for 10 minutes before we started, just talking to us, hey, I like your lighting. Hey, what's going on? He's just the same dude. He was the same dude before I hit record, which is really
Yeah.
cool.
That's awesome. That is
Mhm.
awesome. So, last thing I want to talk about is you're a barbecue guy.
Yeah, oh,
And
yeah.
anyone that follows me on Twitter or X, whatever the hell you want to call it, or on YouTube, they know that I'm a grilling guy. I love to barbecue. I love to grill. What is your favorite way of cooking meat?
Yeah.
That's my question. What's your
Right.
favorite way of cooking meat?
I like Texas style. I like it with
Okay.
just some kosher salt, some coarse black pepper, maybe a little garlic. I tried my hand with every one of those rubs and the sweet rubs and stuff.
Uh-huh.
I don't like a lot of sweet in my barbecue. I like more of the spicy with a little kick. Yesterday I made a rack of short ribs on the smoker, same way Texas style. They came out fantastic. Made a little jalapeno gravy for the top. It was
Ooh.
beautiful.
Now, do you? But you said a smoker. So what? Do you is this like a traditional smoker where you gotta feed it regularly? Are you a cheater that I call 'em, that it's just like, "Oh, I'll check my app on my phone and I'll
Oh, hell
adjust it
yeah, I
accordingly."
cheat. Hell yeah, I cheat. I
Now you
started
can't
it.
cheat, come on, where's the TLC in that?
Well, because you know what it is I was so frustrated with having to go out every 10 minutes because
Yeah,
the temperature was spiking left and right. So I have the Masterbuilt Gravity series. It is still charcoal and wood, so it has a little of that, but it does have a thermostat. And yeah, I'll cheat all day long. I don't care.
that is
I
hysterical.
do not
That's
care. Whatever gets the meat cooking good and has me not running out every 4 minutes to adjust was 225. No, now it's 180. No, now it's 407.
The whole point. That's the whole
yeah.
point.
So
Yeah,
you do that. You just kind of maintain the coals the whole time.
Yeah, it's I'm learning. So I have an old school. Obviously, Oklahoma Joe's has been very kind to me, and they hooked me up with one of their new Bandera smokers, which is a vertical box smoker.
Nice.
It's offset. I also have a Highland grill, which I grill with, but also is an offset smoker. I prefer the vertical. It's so much easier to control everything and where I put the food, and it just based on how long it's going to take. Where I'm dabbling now is the different types of wood and what I like and how it pairs with the meat. So I've been using a lot of mesquite. Mesquite is a stronger wood. It's not as strong as hickory. Hickory is
strong.
It's real strong. I can only do that with chicken, really, but I love apple and pork as pairs really, really well together. But yeah, I love it. I never thought I would love it. I grew up, my dad would just annihilate stuff on a gas grill.
Cook it until it's dead again.
Yeah.
It really was the style.
My kids say, Dad, who taught you how to do this? I said, you know who really taught me? Mr. Bobby Flay. And they're like, what do you mean? I think, who's that? I'm like, he was on the Food Network. I used to watch Grilling with Bobby Flay. That's how I learned how to do all this stuff. That and trial and error. Like, you just have to go out and try. And but no, it's still the old school method, man. You got to go out regularly or queuing up the charcoal as the other one's cooling down so you can manage it and everything. I love it.
One of the things that one of the game changers is such a obvious thing, but any of us who grew up, watching other people just burn meat until it's black and take it off, believe it or not, just probing something to temperature has changed everything, because you actually know when it's legitimately ready, not like it looks ready, or you
feel
make this huge chicken breast and it looks good and it's ready to go. You cut it in half and it's like raw in the middle. Like the temperature probing and control has changed everything. But even then, Jeff, you're going to be very disappointed in me. I use a meter probe, so it's right on my phone. So
good Lord, you're like my brother. So my brother's not going to listen to this, at least not this far, probably. But still, we went down to his house Thanksgiving 2 years ago. He goes, Jeff, I'll grill a turkey at holidays and it's phenomenal. He goes, Jeff, I'm going to put it in the smoker. It's going to be great. What do you recommend? He's asking about the brine that we do, all this stuff.
Yeah.
And so I get down there and he's got the pellet fed stuff and the stupid apps on his phone. I'm like, Jay, what are you doing, man? This is not smoking. This is not anything. This is just a computer that's managing it. It's going to be good. Well, what happens? He doesn't think it's the right temperature. He doesn't trust the technology. So what does he have to do? Hey, Jeff, can you help me out? So here I am with the manual. Here I am with the manual thermometer going into the turkey, checking out the different spots and stuff. I'm like, well, if this was the case, I would have just done it at my own house.
I know. Look, it's I might even go pellet one day. I don't know, because even loading the charcoal. But I like the charcoal and wood mix. It's a nice mix.
The flavor, you don't beat it.
Right, but the other part doesn't change. Let's face it, all of these smokers, they're just an outdoor oven. Like it's not really doing anything insane.
It just tastes better.
Right, you're burning wood for the first hour or two, and then it's just an oven. So I've at the point where I'm busy enough that I'm going to use that as my excuse for not doing it. But it's really just because it looks like a tremendous pain in the butt to manage the coals all the time. So I'm a cheater, but at the same time, I'll still eat it and enjoy it.
Hey, if the product is good, that's all that matters.
Hey, but Tom Brady cheated. He's going to the Hall of Fame, right? So
getting paid $25 million to get roasted on television. But anyways, I thank you for your time, man. You've taken a lot of time, and I do appreciate it. I want you to I give you an opportunity to plug social media handles, your podcast, anything else that you have going that you want to plug. Why don't you go ahead and do that now?
Sure. You can follow me on X, aka Twitter, even though they took my verification away and made me pay for it and I refused. But it's at Rob Sprance, ROBSPRANCE on Twitter. And the show, you can just go to The Whole Podcast, HOLE, thewholepodcast.com, and that's your portal to everything across the board. And I had a great time, man. I really appreciate it. And I'm happy to come on anytime you guys like, season or not.
No problem, man. Hey, I'm sure we'll be in touch. In the meantime, though, enjoy this off season. Get ready for 2024. It should be a lot of fun, Rob. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.